All right, so we're going to be having a look at how to write GREL statements. And you guys have seen some of the stuff we've been doing with GREL a little bit over the various tutorials we've been doing. And so I thought I might just explain a little bit about the basics of how it works. And yeah, we'll just kind of work it out as we go along. If you guys can just record any questions that you've got as we go. Your main resource, as always, is to come and look at the documentation and to see see all the information that it's got here. We'll go through some of this as we go through things today. All right, so I've got a data set open in OpenRefine here in front of me. This is the same data set that we used in the training, and it's after all of the changes and everything that we did in the training. And so what I'm focusing on today is more just how the GREL stuff works, rather than actually wanting to do cleaning in this data set. So for example, I might say, let's split the scientific name field again and pull something out of it. And, you know, obviously we wouldn't normally do that in a data set because we've already got the split fields here. We created this data set by joining the fields together. I mean, maybe you would want to do something because we use this field to do some cleaning. So these fields will still have the old dirty data in them. So maybe we want to do something here with this data. But anyway, let's get straight into it. So where we typically see these GREL statements is when we're doing custom text facets, or when we're duplicating columns. So if I duplicate a column here, so go to edit column, add column based on this column, and it's asking me what do I want to add in the new column. So we gave it a new name. So I'm gonna call this one fixed genus. Fixed genus. Just like I say, an example. Please don't stress too much about that. What we're focusing on here is this GREL expression, right? So the way that you think about an expression is, it's basically a statement, like it's a whole lot of things that we put together with functions, and you know, you've seen the kind of stuff that we do. But the way that you have to think about it is that it must return a value. It needs to return a specific value that you want to store in the new column. In this case, or if you're doing an update, it must return the value that you want to be updated, and so on. And the first thing that we need to know about is that there are a whole lot of like standard things that we use here. And the first one that we'll always see is this one that just says value. And that value is basically referring to an existing value. So it's just saying, so in this case, we're trying to create a new column based on this old column called scientific name. And in expression, we've just said return the value, the original value that we got from the old column. So that word value has a specific name. Something else to be very aware of when you're working with expressions is that you have to be very clear when you use a string. So when you use when you're wanting to get back a string of values, it has to be in quotes, right? So value is not in quotes. That means it's referring to something specific in OpenRefine, in GREL, and in that case, like I say, it's the previous existing value. If I put that value into quotes, it's going to it sees this as something very different. It no longer sees it as the value, which means something to OpenRefine. If I put it in quotes, it's now just the string value, and you can see it's returning value over here, because it thinks I just want to populate this column with all the cells with a string that says value. And I could put any other string in there. I could put my favorite pet in there. So that's, and then we're populating here. All the new values are just going to be my favorite pet. So it's very important whenever you're using an actual string or you're wanting to update to a particular string or something like that, it has to be quoted. Okay, that's how you represent a string to OpenRefine in GREL, is by using those quotes. Okay, so so that's a mistake that people often make, is they leave the quotes off, and then they break the expression or something like that because it's got words in it. So if I use my favorite pet, it's just going to give me null here because OpenRefine doesn't know anything about something called my or favorite or pet, like it does about value. Those things don't exist for OpenRefine, whereas value does. Okay, so that's the first thing. The next thing is when we're working with these strings, the reason that they're called strings is because a computer doesn't know anything about what this means. So I read this thing as a human being, and I see it says Thelatornis capensis oatsii, and to me, I can see that looks like a scientific name, and it looks like a genus, a species, and a subspecies. I know a little bit about snakes, and so I know that this is a vine snake, and it's a particular species of vine snake. You know, there's all of that information that I understand when I read this thing, because I've got that background knowledge. To the computer knows none of those things. All the computer sees here is a string of characters. It sees a T, an uppercase T, then it sees an H, then it sees an E, an L, etc., etc., etc. Then it sees a space. There's a space character there. Then there's a C, and so on. So that's why these things are called strings, and it's because it's a particular data type where the computer just sees a string of characters. The next thing that's important with that, so if you can start to think about these strings in the way that a computer sees them, you can start to manipulate them using various expressions in your GREL statements. So you might say value, and if I want to get so what the way that the computer sees it is as a string of letters, and it knows what the position of each of those letters is in the string. So and it starts at 0, so it starts numbering them from 0. So the T is at position 0, the H is at position 1, the E is at position 2, and so on, all the way till you get to the end of the string. So what I could do, so I can then index those particular values if I wanted to. So here I've got value, which is returning for each row, it's returning what the original value was. But I might only want to have the first letter, in which case I can use a square bracket. So the square bracket is it does that indexing for you, and so I'm basically saying I want value, but I'm using a square bracket. So I know that value is a string because I saw it before. So there's the string, but I might only want the first letter. So I can use the square bracket, and I can say 0, and that just gives me that first letter of every one of those strings. So I might also say that I want the 10th letter, in which case it gives me the 10th letter of those strings. But in this case, in some of these other, I'm not sure why it's not giving it to us for these. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, but the first one is 0, so the one after that is the 10th, which is an S. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it is returning the correct value here. It's returning a space. That's why, so it's actually gone and it's found the space on these ones, on telescopus. So 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The S is the 9. The space is the 10th character, which is why it's giving me something blank. It's not actually blank. It's giving me the space. So, so that's how you would index into a particular value within the string. You can also do substrings, right? So you might say, but what if I want to chop out the 6th to the 10th value? I just want to chop out part of the string. You can do that as well. I'll be very surprised if this works. No, that doesn't work. That's Python, that's not GREL. So, so let's go and have a look and see. So if you go in your into your documentation and you go and read here, it says string functions. This is your menu. Wait, let's start here on the left. So this is the index for all of the different parts of the documentation for OpenRefine. All of the, excuse me, OpenRefine documentation is here. Here's the expression stuff. That's what we're interested in. And what we're looking at now is here on the right-hand side, you've got the individual sections within here. So this is like the sub-menu or the sub-index, which is nice for navigating around. So this is a very nice system of navigation on a web page. And so here we've got the string functions. We know we're not working with Booleans. It's not true. So Booleans are true and false. String is what we've seen. It's strings of characters, format-based functions that we're not going to worry about. We've got arrays and dates. There's math functions. So if you're working with numbers, you can use math. We'll go and see what's in other functions. I don't actually know. But here's the string functions, and we're usually working with strings, and it starts off. So here's length. So we could use. Okay, we'll come back to length. What I want to do is I want to see how we can. So we've got string functions, and I want to see basic string modification. So you can uppercase a string, lowercase, trimming, string parsing and splitting. Maybe it's here to number, split by length, smart split, partition. I'm looking for something called substring. So I'm going to just do a search here quickly. Control F, substring. Let's see. So we've got that and that. These are all testing something about strings. Substring. Okay, there we go. So substring. And where did we find this? Substring was under basic string modification. There's trimming. We were in the right place. So basic string modification, trimming, and substring. So if I read this, it says, so there's a function called substring. The functions always take these rounded brackets so the parentheses. It says S, which is the string. It says N from N2. So, and then we have the documentation. Returns the substring of S, starting from character index from, so that the character index, that's what we were talking about, the 0, the 1, the 2, that corresponds with each letter in the string, from and up to excluding character index 2. So if I wanted to pull out the the fifth to the 10th character of each of these strings, I would start off by saying substring. Is that right? Substring, yes. Substring, open bracket. There's the value. I want the 5th to the 10th, and I close. So now it's pulling out each of those individual sections that I've asked it for. This little preview window at the bottom is what you're always going to be using to make sure that you're getting the actual answer that you want. And because it's terrible trying to remember, okay, we have to count from 0, but so the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I don't know if it's 5, and I don't know if it's 6, and all of that kind of stuff. So it's really nice that you get the preview, and you can tweak your indexes if you need to in order to get exactly the information that you want back. If you, just as an interest, it said that the N2, so up to excluding character index 2, it says that it's optional. So that's what this optional is telling you. And so there, what you can do, you don't actually have to have the last index. You might say you want to get everything from a particular index up to the end of the string. So if you leave off the second index, the 2 index, it'll go from the first index that you put in and go all the way to the end of the string. Okay. So what I'm wanting to show you there is just one example of one of the functions that you've got in GREL to work with strings. I'm obviously not going to go through them all now in this session with you guys. This is just to give you a little bit of a taste of what you can do. But what I'm actually trying to show you here is how to use a function in GREL. I'm just using substring as an example. Okay, so the next thing that's very important, and what you've seen me doing when we've run these tutorials, is that I use the dot notation instead of doing what I just did. And I'm going to show you and what it basically means is that you can use these functions in 2 different ways in GREL. So the first, so I just showed you the first way where we said substring, it's a function. So we open the bracket, we then had the value that we want to operate on, and we said 5, and we said 10, and it gives us, it chops out that particular part of the string. But there's another way to do this, which I think is better, where you say value, and then you use dot substring. And what that is saying is substring. What that is saying is that I'm basically attaching the substring function to the value that came before it, right? So that's what the dot is doing. It's basically saying, do whatever this thing is to the thing that came before it, value.substring. And then I open the brackets. I'm already linked to the value, so I don't need to put the value into the function again. I just put my indexes, 5 and 10. And we get exactly the same thing, right? So what using, so this is the dot notation. And what using the dot notation does is it lets us chain, it's called function chaining, and you can chain functions together to do a whole lot of things in one expression to get the value that you want at the end of the expression. So let's say, for example, and the way to do this is that you build it up slowly. So we started off with value. I'm just going to cut that out. We started off with value. We know what we're getting from value. I then want to get a particular substring. Substring 5, 10. That's now chopping out the particular sequence of characters from the string that I want. Now I want to do something else with them. I'm going to uppercase them. So this is returning a string value, which means I can dot attach another function to it. In this case, I'm going to say to uppercase. To uppercase doesn't take any parameters. So I don't have to put anything in the brackets, but you have to put the brackets. The brackets is basically says run this function. If you don't put the brackets, it's just going to give me nothing. It just gives me the actual function. But I need to have the brackets to say do this thing to the value. So again, we've now uppercased all of those values. So I've got value, I pulled out the substring, I've now uppercased that substring with a dot. I'm going to take a flying shot here. I don't know if this exists. Reverse expects an array. Let's see. OpenRefine, reverse string. I don't know if there is a function to reverse a string, so I'm just Googling it quickly. It doesn't look like it. So I can still do it though. So we've now uppercased it, and let's see if there's another interesting function that we could apply here. Let's do a replace. So I'm going to say uppercase, and I'm going to say replace each, returns the string obtained by replacing each element in S of a find array. Wait, are we into arrays here? Surely not. Replace chars, maybe it's replace chars. Returns the string by replacing a character in S identified by find with the corresponding character identifying the replace. For example, text that was optically recognized dot replace chars returns. Oh, okay, so this is replacing particular characters. Yeah, we'll just do a basic replace. Replace returns the string obtained by replacing the find string with the replace string in the outputted string. So let's go and do that. So we can say to uppercase dot replace until I want to replace. So I'm now asking it to find all capital T's. I need to put it in a quote because T is a string. It's a string with only one character. And I want to replace all T's with capital V's. And close the bracket. So now it's gone and done this. So what I'm trying to illustrate here is just how using this dot notation lets you chain these different operations together, and you can do that to kind of manipulate the whole string and give you what you want. Obviously, for like a real practical example, you would have to actually you would have to think quite carefully about what the steps are going to be, what each of these steps are going to be. You need to know what functions you've got available and how you would string them together. And for that, you really just need to practice. So while you're working in OpenRefine, you might think, I need to take the string, split it in half, just get the second half, make some kind of change to that second half, and so on, to actually work out what your GREL statement is going to be at the end of the day. So okay, so that's just using functions and chaining functions using the full stop. If everybody is happy with that, please put a thumbs up in your reactions. Okay, a couple of thumbs ups coming in. That's great. All right, you can also just drop any questions you've got into the chat as we go along. I'll leave some time at the end as well, just for us to chat and look at any questions. Okay, So the next thing that I want to have a look at is arrays. So we've talked about strings, and I've said that a string is a whole set of characters. I'll show here again. So a string is just a whole string of characters all strung together like that. We put a quote mark to show that it's a string. We also need to be aware of arrays in OpenRefine, because we can work with arrays quite a lot. And what an array is, it's basically a list of different values altogether. And instead of using quotes like we do for strings, we use square brackets to indicate arrays. So in this case, I'm just going to put an array of numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's now giving me an array, right? So the array, you can see here that it's showing me the array is the value that we're going to get back, because I've told it, I've specifically defined the value of the array, that the values that go into the array here. And so it's telling me it's going to give us an array back. But we don't typically obviously want to put an array into a field in OpenRefine. We typically, arrays tend to be intermediate steps. When we're chaining our functions together, we might do something like split an array and then pull out the middle value, or so split a string into an array, pull out the middle value, something like that. And so we've got a whole lot of functions for working with arrays as well. So the first part, so now things might be a little bit confusing, because we've seen the square bracket before, and that was when we had a string and we had, I'll just say favorite pet, and then we could use the square brackets to actually index into that string and get a particular value out of that string. So arrays are also using the square brackets, but they're actually, you think here about the square brackets as actually containing all of the values inside that array. They kind of they wrap around that array. Obviously not round brackets, because we use the round brackets for functions. So we use square brackets to indicate arrays like this. So so this is important. Now this is where it's maybe going to get, even more confusing, is that we can still use square brackets to index into the array, just like we did with the string. So what I'm doing here is I'm first creating an array, but then I'm indexing immediately afterwards. And I'm saying, give me the item at index 3, pull out the item at index 3 in that array. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3. Just like we had with strings, except in this case, the values are separated by commas inside, and we index again from 0. So we're starting from 0 here, 1, 2, and 3. And we can actually index and say, give us the first one, or give us that's the first one. Let's make this a bit more interesting so that we're not, I'm going to call this A, B, and C, and D. This is very, very basic stuff. So now we have an array of characters, and I might say that I want to pull out the first one. So index 0. So index 0 is pointing to the first item in that array, and that pulls out that particular one there. Now I'm interested to go and see if there's a way that we can, like we did substring. In fact, there is, it's right there on the screen. Like we did substring on the string, how can we get a particular set of values, like part of the array out of a bigger array? And it's the first function that we have here. It's called slice. So what we're doing is we're taking a slice out of the array, and we have, again, it says A. This is if you're using it in the function form instead of with dot notation. We've got n from n2 being optional. Again, it looks just like the substring function. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use dot notation. So I've got my array, and then I'm going to say dot slice, and I want to slice from the second character, from the second item of the array to the end. Slice. I just need the 2. I don't need the comma. So I've only provided the 2, so it's saying slice 0, 1, 2. It starts at 2, so it pulls out the C, and then it goes to the end of the array. So I've now made a smaller array with just some of those items. Let me put some more items in here, and I'm just going to put some random items in here, and so I'm just making the array a little bit longer, and then I'm going to say maybe I want the 2 to the 5th. So I'm actually going in, and it's like I'm going 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going in, and I'm literally slicing those values out of the array to produce a smaller array. And I think the array has reverse. We saw earlier. Not reserve, reverse. There we go. So what that's doing now is it's reversing the order of the items in the array. So yeah, so that just gives you an idea of how you can also do chaining with arrays. Again, you've got all of the different array functions here. It's a good idea just to maybe go through them. What you could do, what I would suggest for anyone wanting to work with this kind of stuff is to practice this on your own. So just do something in OpenRefine that gives you this little window, create a new column, a window that you can start playing with expressions, and go through each of the functions and see if you can think of a way that you can use that that particular function in the expression. So for example, here's a sum function. So I'm going to go and I'm going to make my array an array of numbers again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so that's an array. And then if I say dot sum, we don't need anything because we're using dot notation. So it's applying to the array before the dot, and it's now adding up all of those values. Obviously, always 15. Okay. So that's just giving you a quick idea of how arrays actually work. And of course, you can combine these things in any way. That's the whole idea, is that they give you all these different functions that work on different kinds of values, and then you can combine them to do whatever you need to do when you're working with your data. So I'm gonna do something a little bit fancy here. So we said I tried to reverse the order of the characters earlier. So I'm going to, so we've got strings. I was trying to reverse the order of the characters in the strings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by saying value, which gives me the original value. That's exactly what I want. And then I'm going to say dot split. And let's see, that didn't give me what I expected. What I'm wanting to do is split the string into an array of characters. So string parsing and splitting, S or P, sep B, preserve tokens, returns the array of strings obtained by splitting S by sep. The separator can either be a string or a regex pattern. For example, fire, earth, water, blood, dot split with commas returns an array of 4 strings, blah, 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 blah. Note that the space characters are retained by the but the separator is removed. If you include true, empty segments are preserved. So it's not telling me how I can split it into individual characters. Smart split, split by chart type, or partition. So, by the way, this is also something that that is important, is that when you're working with OpenRefine, you could spend quite a lot of time, or you, especially when you're starting out, you should be spending quite a lot of time figuring out how things work, doing a lot of Googling. Split string to characters. GREL functions. Just looking at the options here. If anybody here happens to know how to split a string into split S, returns the array of strings, split by lengths, returns the array obtained by splitting S into substrings with a given length. I wonder, maybe that's the one that we want. So copy paste is always your friend as well. Split by lengths, split by lengths, and I'm going to say 1. No, that's only giving me the first one. N1, N2, for example, split by lengths returns an array of 3 strings. Okay, that's also not what I want. Let's try OpenRefine, reverse string. I thought I did that earlier and we didn't get anything very useful. Transformations. So I know that there is a reverse function, and if I can just work out how to split a split S, P, what is P? Returns the array of strings obtained by splitting S by sep. The separator can be either a string or a regex pattern. Presumably P is regex. For example, blah, 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 spy, returns an array of 4 strings. Note that the space characters are retained. If you include true, empty segments are preserved. So normally, if you do that and you don't include anything, then you get what you want, but that's not working. So I have to play around here a little bit. It's still splitting on the words. Let's see if there's a regex letter boundary. Should not be this hard. Nope, that's not going to help us either. this is getting quite nasty. A to Z, A to Z. Yeah, that's also not working. Splits on those things. Okay, all right. I'm not sure how I would actually do this with the split. I thought the split would give us a split string, but apparently not. So, so what I was wanting to do was let's split on spaces. So I was basically wanting to show how you can convert, how you can use these things to, you know, to manipulate strings. So we'll be able to, so what I've done here is I've used split. I've said split on the space. And so it's now given me an array with each of the names as strings inside that array. And then I could reverse that and reverse, and it now puts them the other way around. And then I could join again with spaces, something like that, to get a reversed set of names if that was what I wanted. Obviously, that doesn't make sense for this particular, you know, for the data that we've got here. But I'm just showing you how you can take a string value, split it into an array, reverse the array, apply some kind of function on the array, and then join the values that are left to make a string again. So where this becomes useful is when you've got values where I've used it where I've needed to like clean strings up, and yeah, so I mean I can't think of any specific examples offhand, but yeah, you can just experiment with these things and try to see how it might be useful to you. Okay, so that's a little bit of strings and arrays. Just to look at some of the other examples here. So we've got Boolean functions. You can, so Booleans are like true and false, where things are true and false. And you can, so again, so these you can't chain, you can't use the dot notation with these, but you'll see if you do try to chain them, they don't work. But it basically this returns a true or not, a true or a false. And that's useful sometimes when you're wanting to, you might want to see value dot, so you might say value dot contains. So the contains is a string function, contains a t. I need to put it inside the bracket. Contains a t, and value dot contains a t. So you can see now. So this is, so contains is a function that works on a string, but it returns true or false. So I can say, does my value contain a t? True, false, true, true, true. But I might want to know, does it contain a t and contain a v? And I can't do a contains on a true because that's not going to work. So I might say something, so the way that the Booleans work, so I'll say and it says value contains t, comma, value dot contains s, or did I say v, eh? V, like that. Now that's all false. Let's try an s. Yeah, so some of them, so these have t's and s's, t's and s's. So so basically what we're seeing here is it's saying and it's expecting a b1, which must be a Boolean. So that's why they're using b. So a value here, a Boolean value here, a Boolean value here. The dot 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 means you can add as many of these as you want, and then you can get you know, are they all true, or are they all false, that kind of thing. So yeah, so that's just a little bit of working with Booleans, and I see you can actually get you can actually chain them. So let's try that. So I'm going to say value.contains t dot and value.contains v, I said, or s, I said. And that's not working, and that's because I need one more closing bracket. And so that's working there as the documentation says it should work. Okay, so that's a little bit of the Boolean stuff. And so we've looked at Booleans, strings, arrays. There are various functions for dates as well. Let's have a look at math functions quickly. So the math functions are nice if you've got you know, numbers that you're working with in a data set and you're wanting to convert them to something. And you can see things here. So we've got abs, so that's to get an absolute value. If you've got both positive and negative values in a column, and for some reason you need the absolute value, you can use abs. So for example, we use this when we calculate quarter-degree squares from geographic coordinates, because we want the absolute value of the latitude, and the latitude is a negative number. ACOS, that's arc, cosine, all the stuff, trigonometry stuff. Ceiling, so you've got round, so you can round numbers. Let's go and find round. PQR, random, here's round. So round a number to the nearest integer. So we can just try that quickly. Round 12.34, da, 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 da. So you can see that's what round does, but we can also use SEIL, seal, that means ceiling. So round sort of, you know, it rounds down if the fraction is below 0.5, and it rounds up if it's 0.5. But sometimes you want to say, you know, you've got a fraction value here. You want to know what the next highest integer is, and you use ceiling for that, or you can use floor, ceiling and floor for 0.8. Let's say so 12.844. If you used round, that would give you 13. But sometimes you want to know what the lowest, what the integer value is at the bottom of this number. I can't think of another way to put it. Floor. So yeah, so those are just some of the math functions. I've never really used any of this when I've been working in OpenRefine, but I do use date functions, and this is useful when you import data from Excel, for example, and Excel scrambles dates. It's really quite hectic what Excel can do with dates. And so you can start working with these date functions in Excel to start in OpenRefine to try and fix dates if they have been scrambled by Excel. And dates are very complicated. You know, there's all different parts of them. You'd have to go through and read through the documentation to see what's all there. Okay. So it sounds like a lot. It's going to take a lot of practice to get used to working with all of this stuff. But if you think about it, I mean, this is the documentation for all of the functions that we've got in GREL. It's one web page. It's once you see it from top to bottom, it's not actually that long. Yes, it's going to take you practice. You're not going to remember everything. I mean, I definitely don't remember all the functions. I'm working with this documentation all the time when I'm working with OpenRefine, Googling all the time when I'm working with OpenRefine. So yeah, so you'll just have to get used to working with both. You know, that's how we do it. Okay, so I'm going to end that there then and just have a look at the questions in the chat quickly. Okay, so the session's recorded. Is using the splitting character the same as using a substring? So Maxine, I might have answered that question now when you saw me doing the splitting, and it's not quite the same. So when you're using a substring, you're pulling out another string, whereas when you do split, you're pulling out an array. You're getting an array back to do something with. Obviously, OpenRefine has that really nice simple functionality. Let me just share my screen. So you always want to try and see if OpenRefine doesn't have a simpler way of doing things before you get to using GREL. So it's got these functions here, like there's a replace, there's trims. So for example, we could go and I could say edit cells, transform. Here's my GREL window. There's a trim function, value.trim, which trims all of those functions, which trims all of the values. But you can also just go value edit cells, common transformations, and there's a trim. If you wanted to replace, you could replace. And if you wanted to split, if we did want to split this into new columns, we could just use this menu option. There's the separator. I'm going to use a space, not a, and I'm going to say remove. I will remove this column. Split into how many columns? Okay. And so there we've now split that. So yeah, so always just check before you go to GREL that there isn't just a simple way of doing something using the standard menus in OpenRefine. But then GREL really gives you that nice functionality that it gives you like a lot of control over what you're doing when you're working with the individual cells and values. Okay, I hope I've answered you, Maxine. Then we've got my data has symbols for male and female. Can one use symbols in GREL? You can. So if I wanted to, let's hypothetically say, I mean, these are really terrible examples that I'm using, but I'm trying to focus on the fact that we're using GREL and not the actual data cleaning. So let's say, for example, I wanted to replace the any small letter T's with a male gender symbol, right? So I'm going to say value.replace, and I mean, you could do this in you know, you don't need GREL to do this, but I'm going to show you that you can do it in GREL. Male symbol. There it is. Let's see if that'll work. Copy. I'm going to replace all lowercase t's with male symbols. Some funny thing like that. So there you can see how it's able to consider these kinds of characters, and it is able to put them back into the values. I might say I also want to replace all capital T's. I'm going to just, in fact, I'll just copy this, copy, paste, all capital T's, and now we've got the male symbol in there as well. So yeah, so it works with symbols. Where you might want to be doing that, where it's more likely is where you have special characters that have been scrambled in your data set. So for example, there's always this thing with Muller, where we have Muller with this little umlaut above it. Muller was a taxonomist, a reptile taxonomist, and every reptile database has got his name messed up because of the special character. So you might want to replace all U characters in the data set. I'm not actually sure if there are any with that special character. And let's see. Yeah, so there we've now gone and replaced the U's. So you would, if you were dealing with characters that have been scrambled, you would put you would put the string of whatever has been, because you can put multiple characters in here when you do a replace. You can put multiple. You would take the scrambled representation of that character, put it in here, and just replace it with what the correct special character should be. And then don't import it into Excel again afterwards, because that will just scramble it again for you. Okay. All right, are there any more questions from the group? If you found that helpful, please put a green thumbs up in a green tick in your reactions. If you're very confused, please put a head scratching emoji in the reactions. Hopefully there aren't any of those. Okay. All right. I'm going to take it that there are no more questions, and I'm going to wish you all luck with exploring the wonderful world of GREL statements. And of course, you know, you're always welcome to get in touch if you're having any trouble. For the data technicians, you know, we've got our Slack channels where you can always ask if you need help trying to construct a GREL statement. There's one hand up, Rihanna.
Ian, thank you very much. I was just wondering, where could we find the recordings of these sessions? I missed a few and I would like to work through them.
Sure. So to be honest, I'm not sure that we have been recording the previous ones. I don't think we have been. So this is I think this is the first. I'm gonna stop the recording here anyway, if I can work out how to.